The morning my son told me to leave the cabin, I was sitting on the porch of a different house entirely, looking at a lake he did not know existed, with a deed he would never touch in the top drawer beside my coffee mug. The phone rang at 7:42. Brandon's name lit up the screen. I answered because he was still my son, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Dad, we've made a decision. We're selling Lake Lure. You need to have your things out before Thanksgiving." Before I tell you how quiet I was when he said that, my name is Thomas Reed. I'm 72 years old, a retired railroad bridge inspector from Asheville, North Carolina, father of 2 children, widower of one woman who deserved a better ending than cancer gave her. And this is the story of a son who mistook patience for weakness, a daughter who stayed silent when silence became a choice, and an old man who had spent his entire life reading load-bearing points before anything collapsed. Welcome to Dad's Cold Justice. Subscribe to the channel if stories like this keep you listening, and drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is where you live. I always like knowing how far a story can travel. The cabin everybody knew about sat on Lake Lure, down in Rutherford County, not far from Chimney Rock, about 45 minutes from my little brick house in West Asheville. If traffic behaved and the mountain roads were clear, I bought the lot in 1996 for $41,500. Back then, people said I had overpaid for a narrow piece of dirt with old pines, Arokibank, and a dock that leaned like a tired man after a double shift. My wife June did not say I was foolish. She looked at that water, looked at me, and said, "If you are going to build it yourself, Thomas, you better not die halfway through and leave me with a pile of lumber and a pretty view." That was June. Practical first, romantic later, always honest enough to make love feel solid. I built that cabin over 4 summers. Brandon was 10 when I set the first posts. Hannah was 7, missing both front teeth, carrying nails in a coffee can, and calling herself the assistant boss. The place was never fancy. 2 bedrooms, a sleeping loft, a screened porch, pine floors that never sat perfectly level, and a stone fireplace I rebuilt twice because the first version smoked like a cheap grill. But it was ours. Every Memorial Day weekend, every Labor Day, every birthday that needed extra chairs, every hard conversation that seemed easier when the lake was doing the talking for us. That cabin carried the weight. When June got sick in 2015, Lake Lure became the only place where she could breathe without looking at a calendar of appointments. We spent her last good October there, wrapped in blankets on the porch, watching fog lift off the water. Brandon came twice that month. Hannah came every weekend. We cooked soup, played old card games, and pretended for a few hours at a time that the world had not already made its decision about her. June died in February of 2016. After the funeral, I went back to that cabin alone and sat in the dark until the fireplace burned down to orange lines. I remember thinking the room had learned how to miss her before I had. What I did not tell Brandon, what I did not tell Hannah, what I did not tell any church friend who brought casseroles to the house, was that 8 months after I buried my wife, I bought another place. We will get to that. A good foundation is useless if you reveal the whole structure before the load has been applied. By 2023, Brandon was 41, senior sales director at a medical equipment company in Charlotte. Divorced once, remarried to a woman named Kelsey, who had a taste for white kitchens, European vacations, and numbers that always seemed to work out in her favor. Hannah was 38, a school counselor in Hendersonville. Good heart, soft spine. I say that with love, because I love my daughter. But love does not require a man to lie about what he has seen. Brandon had changed slowly, not overnight. Nobody becomes greedy in one clean motion. It happens like water, finding a crack in concrete. First he asked what the property taxes were. Then he asked if I had updated my will. Then he started using words like liquidity, unrealized value, and smarter allocation at Thanksgiving dinner while I was trying to pass him green beans. Hannah would look down at her plate when he talked like that. She knew the sound of him pushing. She had known it since childhood. Brandon always made his wishes feel like weather. Everyone else learned to dress accordingly. Years earlier, for estate planning, I had placed the Lake Lure cabin into a small family limited liability company called Reed Mountain Cabin LLC. I stayed managing member. Brandon and Hannah each held a non-voting membership interest that would make inheritance simpler when my time came. They were told what that meant. They were also told what it did not mean. It did not mean they could sell the property. It did not mean they could sign listing contracts. It did not mean they could treat their father like a tenant. But people hear the part that benefits them and misplace the rest. The trouble started on a Sunday evening in early October. I was in my kitchen making cornbread the way June used to, which means I was failing at it but making the effort anyway. Brandon called. His voice had that polished carefulness he used when selling something he hoped you would not inspect too closely. "Hey, Dad," he said. "You got a minute? I have cornbread in the oven." I said. He laughed once. "Too quick. This will only take a second." That was my first warning. Nothing that only takes a second ever does. He said he and Hannah had been talking. He said the cabin was becoming a burden. He said the market around Lake Lure was strong again. He said a broker he knew, Lydia Crane out of Hendersonville, thought the property could bring $460,000, maybe more if the right Charlotte buyer got emotional. I let him talk. I had learned long ago that a person will tell you how far they have gone if you do not interrupt too early. Finally, I said, "Brandon, when did you speak to this broker?" Silence. "Just preliminary," he said. That was not my question. "A couple weeks ago." "A couple weeks." My son had brought a stranger into a family place before he brought the subject to me. And Hannah knows about this. She agrees it makes sense. "Put her on." "She's not here." "Then conference her in." A long pause. A little breath through his nose. Then the phone clicked, and my daughter's voice entered small and already sorry. "Hi, Dad." "Hannah," I said. "Did you agree to list the cabin?" "I agreed we should talk about options." "That is not the same thing." "I know." "Did Brandon already send paperwork to a broker?" Another pause. "The kind that tells a father more than a speech would." "I think he sent the LLC documents," she said. I looked at the oven clock. The cornbread had 8 minutes left. Funny what the mind notices when the heart is cracking. "Did either of you think to ask me before this?" Brandon jumped in. "Dad, you're making it sound ugly. We were trying to help. You're 72. That road gets icy. The dock needs work. Insurance is up. We're just being realistic." There it was. Realistic. A word greedy people use when they want kindness to sound foolish. "I have heard enough." I said, "Dad, don't hang up." "I'm not hanging up. I am ending a conversation that should never have started this way." Then I hung up. I burned the cornbread. June would have laughed at that. She would have said, "Thomas, the bread knew you were mad." I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that. The house quiet, except for the refrigerator humming. I was hurt before I was angry. That matters. Anger is loud. Hurt is precise. At 72, you do not have the energy to explode at every insult. You choose where to place the charge. You choose when the bridge comes down. I went to the hall closet, opened the small fireproof safe, and removed a blue folder with a brass clip at the top. Inside were 2 sets of documents. The first was the Reed Mountain Cabin LLC operating agreement, signed and notarized in 2012. Section 7. Paragraph 4. Unauthorized attempt to sell, encumber, or transfer company property by a non-managing member triggers mandatory redemption of that member's interest. That sentence had looked unnecessary when the attorney drafted it. I remembered June teasing me. "Thomas, do you really think your children are going to stage a hostile takeover of a cabin with crooked floors?" "No," I had told her. "But I spent 40 years inspecting structures after other people said they were fine." The second document in the folder was the deed to the place nobody knew about. Lake Glenville, near Cashiers, higher up, colder air, deeper water, quieter money. Bought in October of 2016 and placed in the June Reed Family Trust. I read the address twice, though I knew it by heart. Then I put everything back except one copy of the operating agreement, which I laid on the table beside the burned cornbread. 2 days later came the call at 742. Brandon did not ease into it this time. Confidence had taken the wheel. "Dad, We've made a decision, he said. We're selling Lake Lure. Lydia has buyers lined up. You need to have your things out before Thanksgiving. We, I repeated. Yes, me and Hannah. And you are calling to inform me. I am calling to stop this from becoming a fight. I almost admired the sentence. It took a special kind of nerve to start a fight, and then accuse the other man of being too close to it. I looked out over the water in front of me. Not Lake Lure. The other lake. A cold, high, blue sheet of stillness Brandon had never seen. Soame, I said. Which porch do you think I am sitting on right now? He stopped. What? Which porch? The cabin porch. He said. Lake Lure. I did not say that. Dad? What are you talking about? I am talking about the danger of assuming you know where a man is standing. Are you trying to be clever? No. I said. I am trying to be patient. Then I ended the call and let him live with the question. Now I need to tell you about Lake Glenville. 8 months after June died, I took a drive with no real plan. I left Asheville before sunrise, passed through Hendersonville, then headed west until the roads tightened and the mountains began stacking themselves in layers. I ended up near Cashiers, on a road lined with rhododendron and stone walls. I saw a for sale sign half hidden by laurel. The property sat above Lake Glenville, tucked into a slope with a west-facing deck. 3 bedrooms, a stone chimney, and windows tall enough to make the water feel like part of the room. It was not a cabin. It was a lodge. Not huge. Not flashy. Just built with the kind of restraint that tells you the person who designed it respected the land. I bought it for $310,000. Cash. June and I had saved our whole married life. We drove used cars, paid off debt early, packed sandwiches on road trips, and never bought anything because a stranger on television said we deserved it. After she died, I did not want a boat. I did not want a cruise. I wanted one place in the world that had no history of hospitals in it. I named the trust after her, the June Reed Family Trust, revocably, because my attorney insisted life changes and documents should be able to keep up. The only person I told was Marcus Bell, an old friend from my railroad days who later worked in the Buncombe County Register's office before retiring. Marcus knew deeds the way preachers know psalms. He also knew when not to ask questions. For 7 years, Brandon and Hannah drove to Lake Lure, sat on that porch, talked around the future, and looked at the cabin as if it were already divided on a spreadsheet. All the while, the real inheritance waited almost 80 miles away, above a higher lake, behind a locked gate, collecting sunsets like interest. The listing went live on a Wednesday. Marcus called me at 9:13 in the morning. Thomas, he said. You, sitting down. I am 72. I am often sitting down. Your Lake Lure place just popped up. Lydia Crane has it listed under Brandon Reed and Hannah Reed as family owners, asking $479,000. I looked at the steam rising from my coffee. How many photos? 29. They even used the porch shot with June's blue rocking chair in it. That was the first moment I felt real anger. Not because of the listing price. Not because of the paperwork. Because of that chair. June had painted it blue in 2004 after deciding the porch needed something happy. Her hands had been dotted with paint for 2 days because she never wore gloves no matter how many times I told her to. Brandon had looked at that chair, or allowed a broker to look at it, and turned it into marketing. Any interest, I asked. Plenty. Charlotte buyers. One from Raleigh, one couple from Atlanta. Let it run. Marcus went quiet. Thomas. Let it run. You could shut this down today. I know. You sure you want to watch it go that far? No, I said, but I want them to. A man who only hears no can pretend he misunderstood. A man who watches his plan collapse under its own weight has fewer places to hide. The offer came 18 days later. Brandon called like a boy who had found money in a parking lot. Dad, we got it, he said. A serious offer. $462,000 cash. No financing issue. They want to close fast. Who is they? Couple from Charlotte. Grant and Melissa Harlan. He's in software. She's a dermatologist. 2 kids. They love the lake. They love the cabin. I said, Exactly. And they can close. November 7th. I see. We just need you to sign off as managing member. Lydia says it's cleaner that way. Cleaner. Another word people use when they have made a mess. Why would you need me to sign if you already made the decision? A little stutter came through the phone. Small. But there. Because of the LLC structure. It's just procedure. I leaned back in my chair. You remember what I asked you last week? Brandon. He exhaled. Dad, can we not do riddles? Which porch? Please, call me when the closing is scheduled. I said, and Brandon what wear? A good jacket. He did not like that. I could hear it in the silence before he hung up. That Thursday, I drove to Asheville to see my attorney. Rebecca Salazar, 53 years old. Born in Raleigh. Educated at Wake Forest. And sharp enough to cut paper just by looking at it. She had handled June's estate. She had drafted both trusts. She had written Section 7, Paragraph 4. Rebecca had the habit of reading silently with one eyebrow raised. The higher that eyebrow went, the worse somebody else's day was about to become. I set everything on her conference table. The listing, the offer, the emails Marcus had forwarded, the LLC agreement, the screenshots of June's blue chair on the public listing. Rebecca read for 7 minutes without speaking. Then she looked up and said, They used the chair. I nodded. That was unwise. Legally or personally, yes, she said. That is why I liked Rebecca. She walked me through the structure. Reed Mountain Cabin LLC owned the Lake Lure property. I was the sole managing member. Brandon and Hannah were non-managing members with limited rights. They could not authorize a sale. They could not sign for the company. The operating agreement gave me the right to redeem their interests if they attempted unauthorized transfer. What do you want? Rebecca asked. I want the Harlans protected. I said, They did not do anything wrong. Good. I want Lydia Crane to explain herself to her broker. Likely. I want Hannah to stop hiding behind Brandon. Rebecca nodded. And Brandon, I looked at June's blue chair in the listing photo on Rebecca's screen. I want him to reach the table, believing he won. Rebecca closed the folder slowly. That is colder than I expected from you. Thomas. I am not cold, I said. I am tired of being warmed by people standing too close to my fire. The closing was set for Tuesday, November 7th, at 10:00 a.m. in Hendersonville, in a title office near Church Street, with frosted glass doors and a waiting room that smelled like printer toner and lemon cleaner. Brandon called me 3 times the day before, once to confirm the time, once to ask if I wanted him to drive me, once to remind me to bring identification. That last one nearly made me laugh. The boy who needed my signature thought I needed help, remembering my wallet. Hannah texted the night before. Just 3 words. Are you okay? I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back. Are you? She did not answer. I arrived at the title office 14 minutes early. Rebecca was not with me. That was part of the plan. A visible attorney makes guilty people careful. An absent attorney makes them comfortable. The Harlans were already there. Grant was tall. Polite. A little nervous in the way men get when they have moved money around and want everything to go smoothly. Melissa wore a gray coat and kept looking at photos of the cabin on her phone. Lydia Crane came in next. Heels clicking. Folda una haram. Smile bright enough to feel expensive. She shook my hand and called me Mr. Reed with the warm voice of a woman who had no idea how much trouble her paperwork was in. Brandon walked in at 9:58 wearing a charcoal blazer in confidence. Kelsey had dressed him. I could tell. He had the look of a man dressed by someone who expected a celebratory dinner afterward. Hannah followed behind him. Bal. Hands around a paper coffee cup she had not opened. Dad, Brandon said, crossing the room. Glad you made it. Would not miss this, I said. He smiled. It was not a son's smile. It was a closer's smile. The closing officer, a man named Wayne Pritchard, invited everyone into the conference room. Long table, blue pens, bottled water, stacks of paper lined up like small white headstones. Grant Harlan shook my hand. Mr. Reed, your place is beautiful. We know it has history. and we plan to take good care of it. That hurt, because I believed him. I hope you find the right place for your family, I said. He looked confused for half a second, then smiled politely. Wayne began the usual opening remarks. Identification, settlement statements, deed transfer, authority documents. Lydia opened her folder. Brandon sat straighter. Hannah looked at the table. My phone buzzed. Rebecca. When you are ready. I stood. Wayne stopped mid-sentence. Mr. Reed, I apologize. I said, there is a call I need to place before any document is signed. Brandon's face tightened. Dad, what are you doing? What I should have done before you sent photographs of your mother's chair to strangers. Hannah closed her eyes. I stepped into the hallway and called Rebecca. She answered on the first ring. 30 seconds later, I walked back into the room and handed my phone to Wayne Pritchard. My attorney needs to speak with the closing officer, I said. The room changed before anyone understood why. It was subtle at first. A shift in posture. A pen set down. Lydia's smile dimming at the edges. Wayne listened. Yes. Mom, he said. Then, say that again, please. Then his eyes moved to Brandon. Then to Lydia. Then to the stack of documents in front of him as if the papers had become something unsafe to touch. He handed the phone back to me and cleared his throat. This closing cannot proceed. Grant Harlan leaned forward. I'm sorry, Wayne kept his voice level. There is an authority issue with the seller party. Reed Mountain Cabin, LLC, is the title holder. The individuals who executed the listing and purchase contract did not have authority to bind the company to a sale. Lydia's mouth opened. Brandon turned toward me slowly. Dad. I sat down, folded my hands, and said nothing. Wayne continued because legal men prefer facts when a room begins to burn. Only the managing member can authorize transfer, according to the operating agreement. That is Mr. Thomas Reed. No written consent was provided. Grant looked at Lydia. You told us the family was aligned. Lydia looked at Brandon. Brandon looked at me. Hannah looked like she wanted the floor to soften and take her down quietly. There are moments when a room becomes a mirror. Nobody likes those moments. They show too much. Lydia tried first. Mr. Reed, perhaps we can step out and resolve this privately. No, I said. One word. Not loud. It did not need help. Grant pushed his chair back. We paid for inspection. We wired earnest money. My wife took 2 days off. Our children think we're buying this cabin. Melissa put her hand on his arm. Grant. No, he said. Still controlled but no longer soft. I want to know whether we have been negotiating for a property. These people had no right to sell. Wayne adjusted his glasses. That appears to be the issue. Lydia's face had gone the color of office paper. And Brandon, my son, sat there in his charcoal blazer. Learning that confidence is not the same thing as authority, I stood again. Mr. and Mrs. Harlan, I am sorry you were put in this position. You did not deserve it. I would suggest you speak with your own attorney regarding your expenses. Grant stared at me, then at Brandon. He was angry, but he was not stupid. He knew the target had moved. Rebecca Salazar arrived at 1027. She liked timing almost as much as she liked clean documents. She entered the room with a black leather folder, nodded to me, then introduced herself to everyone in the room. No drama. No raised voice. Just the calm of a woman who had brought the map to a place where other people had gotten lost. She placed the operating agreement on the table and opened it to Section 7. This document governs Reed Mountain Cabin, LLC. She said, Mr. Reed is the managing member. Brandon Reed and Hannah Whitaker hold non-managing interests. They have no authority to list, contract, convey, or otherwise bind the company to a sale of the property. She turned one page. Further, the unauthorized attempt to sell company property triggers a mandatory redemption clause. Mr. Reed has elected to exercise that clause. Hannah whispered. What does that mean? Rebecca looked at her. Not unkindly. It means your membership interests in the LLC will be redeemed according to the formula you agreed to when you signed the operating agreement. Book value. Less costs caused by the unauthorized action. Brandon stood. That's ridiculous. We didn't know. Rebecca's eyebrow moved. Just a little. You signed it in 2012. Mr. Reed. Your initials are on every page. Brandon looked at me then. Not like a son. Like a man trying to find the loose board in a floor that had already given way. You planned this, he said. I planned for this, I said. There is a difference. Lydia left first. She said she needed to call her broker. She did not shake anyone's hand. Her heels sounded different leaving than they had coming in. The Harlans left second. Grant stopped beside me at the door. I believe you, he said quietly. About being sorry? I am. He nodded toward Brandon and Hannah. I hope whatever this is was worth it to them. Then he walked out with his wife. Wayne gathered the documents with the speed of a man who wanted the room to become someone else's problem. Within 5 minutes, only 4 of us remained. Me, Rebecca, Brandon, Hannah. Rebecca looked at me. I nodded. She stepped into the hallway and closed the door softly behind her. For a while, nobody spoke. Then Brandon said, You let me sit there. Yes. You let it get all the way to closing. Yes. You could have stopped the listing on day 1. I could have. He laughed once. But there was no humor in it. What kind of father does that? I looked at my son. And for just a second, I saw him at 10 years old, holding a level upside down, telling me the porch beam was perfect, the kind whose son told him to move out before Thanksgiving. I said. He looked away. Hannah started crying then, quietly. She did not cover her face. Tears just came down. And she let them. I'm sorry, she said. I know you are, I said. But sorry after the table collapses is not the same as refusing to sit at it. She took that like it landed where it was supposed to. Brandon paced to the window. We were trying to help. No, I said. You were trying to take control and call it help. The taxes are high. The dock needs work. You are up there alone. Then you ask. You do not hire a broker. You do not sign paperwork. You do not let strangers photograph your mother's chair. His shoulders tightened at that. Good. Let the small things find him. Big numbers can make people defensive. A blue chair can make them remember. I sat at the head of the table where Wayne had been sitting and motioned for both of them to sit down. Hannah sat first. Brandon waited, then did the same. I am going to explain what happens next. I said, You are both going to listen. No selling. No spinning. No correcting the old man. Brandon's jaw worked, but he stayed quiet. The Harlans will probably seek reimbursement. Inspection. Appraisal. Travel. Attorney fees. Maybe more, if their lawyer feels ambitious. Rebecca estimates the real exposure between $16,000 and $28,000, depending on how hard Lydia's brokerage fights and how much blame they push back on you. Hannah looked sick. Your membership interests in Reed Mountain Cabin LLC are being redeemed. The formula is in the agreement. After offsets, neither of you should expect a meaningful check. Brandon's head came up. So you're taking us out of the cabin? No, I said. You took yourselves out when you tried to sell what you did not manage. That's legal language. That is consequence language. He swallowed hard. The cabin stays in the LLC. I remain managing member. When I am gone, it will no longer pass automatically to either of you. Rebecca drafted the amendment yesterday. Hannah whispered, Dad. I looked at my daughter. You knew enough to be uneasy. You knew enough to text me the night before. But you did not know enough to stop your brother. She nodded through tears. I have loved you both since before you had names. I said, Nothing I am saying changes that. But inheritance is not proof of love. It is responsibility transferred after trust has survived. Today, trust did not survive. Brandon rubbed both hands over his face. That it? He asked. No, I said. We have not talked about Lake Glenville. Both of them went still. Brandon lowered his hands. What is Lake Glenville? I waited long enough for the question to feel heavy. It is a lake near Cashiers. Higher elevation. Quiet. Beautiful. June would have loved it. And in some ways I think she does. Hannah stared at me. In 2016. I bought a lodge there. 3 bedrooms. Stone fireplace. West-facing deck. Deep Water View. I placed it in the June Reed Family Trust. Brandon blinked. You bought another property. Yes. With what money? That question told me more than he meant it to. With what money? Not why did you never tell us? Not are you happy there? Money first. Always the crack in the concrete showing itself. With money your mother and I saved by living smaller than people thought we could afford. I said. Rebecca stepped back into the room then. I had asked her to wait for that moment. Because some truths deserve a witness. She placed a second document in front of me. I slid it to the middle of the table. This is the trust amendment. I said. As of yesterday, neither of you is successor beneficiary of the Lake Glenville Lodge. Hannah covered her mouth. Brandon stared at the paper, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into mercy. When I said, the lodge goes to Blue Ridge Land and Water Conservancy. They will protect the shoreline and use the property for limited family retreat programs for children who have lost a parent. The room lost all sound. That was June's idea, though she never knew it. Years before she got sick, we had volunteered with grieving kids through a church program. She used to say children needed quiet places where nobody asked them to be okay too quickly. I looked at my children and watched them understand that the punishment was not random. It had a shape. It had her shape. Brandon sat back slowly. How much I almost smiled. But not because it was funny. There he is. I said. His face reddened. Dad. I didn't mean. Yes. You did? And I am going to answer, because the number matters. I tapped the document once. Rebecca ordered an appraisal last month for insurance and trust planning. Lake Glenville came back at $1,240,000. Hannah made a small sound, almost a breath-breaking. Brandon did not move. The Lake Lure offer was $462,000. I said, split in the way you imagined. After costs and taxes. Maybe a little over $200,000 each, if everything went perfectly. I leaned forward. You burned a future worth more than $1 million because you got impatient over a cabin you had no right to sell. No one spoke. I let the numbers stand beside each other. 462,000. 1,240,000. Greed hates comparison, when comparison tells the truth. Brandon's voice came out low. You were going to leave it to us, yes. Both of us, yes. Why didn't you tell us? Because a gift announced too early becomes a target. He looked at me then, and at last I saw something crack. Not his pride. Pride bends and returns. This was deeper. This was the moment a man realizes he did not lose a thing because his father was cruel. He lost it because his father finally believed him. Hannah whispered, I am so sorry. I nodded. I know. Brandon looked down at his hands. I thought we were doing what made sense. No. I said, you thought money was the only thing that made sense. You forgot history makes sense. You forgot grief makes sense. You forgot a blue chair can matter more than a clean offer. His eyes shined, but no tears fell. Brandon had always fought tears like they were an enemy. I stood and buttoned my coat. You are still my children. That does not change. You can come to dinner. You can call me. You can sit on the Lake Lure porch if I invite you. But you will not manage what I built, and you will not inherit what you tried to rush. Hannah reached across the table as if to touch my hand, then stopped halfway, unsure she had the right. That broke my heart more than Brandon's anger. I put my hand over hers for 1 second. Go home, I said gently. Sit with the part of you that knew this was wrong. Do not make excuses for it. Just sit with it until it teaches you something. Then I looked at Brandon. And you. Call a lawyer today. Not tomorrow. Do not let Kelsey convince you this can be shouted into becoming someone else's fault. His face changed at her name. She already knows, I asked. He said nothing. She was counting on that money? Again. Nothing. That conversation belongs to you. I said, try honesty. It will feel strange at first. I walked out with Rebecca. In the hallway. She asked, are you all right? No. She nodded. That was the more believable answer. Outside, the November air had that mountain bite to it. I sat in my truck for a moment before starting the engine. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I had expected shaking. Instead, I felt empty, in a clean way. Like a room after the old carpet has finally been pulled up. I drove west. Not home. Past Hendersonville. Past the turns, where the road narrows. Past overlooks, where tourists stop to take pictures without understanding that mountains look soft only from a distance. By late afternoon, I reached Lake Glenville. The gate creaked when it opened. Leaves had gathered along the gravel drive. The lodge stood where it always had, quiet and patient. West-facing deck, waiting for the sun to finish its work. I made coffee I did not need, and sat outside in June's old wool coat. Not the same blue chair. I had left that at Lake Lure. This chair was cedar. Plain. Heavy. The kind that does not move unless you mean it. The sunset spread across the lake in copper and red. For a few minutes. The whole surface looked like something forged. Not water, but metal, still cooling. June, I said out loud, you would have hated parts of today. The lake gave no answer. You would have told me I made it too dramatic. Still nothing. Then you would have asked whether they learned anything. That was the question that stayed with me. Not whether they suffered. Suffering is cheap. People do it all the time, and learn nothing. Did they learn? I did not know. 3 days later, Brandon called Rebecca. Not me. Rebecca. That told me he was scared enough to be practical. The Harlans requested reimbursement for inspection, appraisal, travel, lost work, and legal consultation. Lydia's brokerage took part of it. Brandon paid the rest. His portion came to $18,900. Kelsey did not take it well. Marcus heard from somebody who heard from somebody else, which is how mountain news travels when it wants to pretend it is not gossip. 2 weeks after the failed closing, Hannah came by my house in Asheville with a casserole she made herself. It was terrible. Too much salt. Noodles overcooked. Cheese burned on one edge. I ate 2 helpings. We talked for an hour before she cried. Then we talked for another hour after. She admitted she had known Brandon was moving too fast. She admitted she had been afraid of making him angry. She admitted something harder, too. A part of her had wanted the money. That was the first honest thing anyone had said since the Sunday cornbread burned. I told her, wanting money does not make a person bad. Letting want drive the car while conscience is locked in the trunk. That is where the road gets dangerous. She laughed through tears at that. You sound like Mom. No, I said. Your mother would have said it better and made you eat soup. Brandon did not call me for 26 days. When he finally did, it was a Sunday night. I was watching a football game with the sound low. Not because I cared who won, but because the room felt less empty with voices in it. Dad, he said. Brandon. Long silence. I messed up. There were a dozen things I could have said. I chose none of them. Yes, I said. I keep telling myself I was trying to help, but I know I like the number. That is a beginning. Kelsey is furious. I imagine. She says you humiliated me. No, I said. You brought humiliation to a public table and asked everyone else to pretend it was business. He breathed out slowly. I don't know how to fix this. You do not fix it quickly. You fix it by becoming the kind of man who would not do it again. He did not answer for a while. Then he said, Can I come to dinner sometime? I looked toward the dark kitchen. Toward the drawer where June kept recipes I still could not follow. Yes, I said, but do not bring paperwork. A small laugh came through. Broken, but real. That was a start. Not forgiveness. People rush that word because they like clean endings. Life does not close clean just because a story needs music under it. The Lake Lure cabin is no longer listed. The photographs came down. June's blue chair is back where it belongs, facing the water, paint chipped on both arms. Stubborn as ever, Reed Mountain Cabin LLC has 1 managing member and no children with voting rights. Direct rights, implied rights, emotional rights, or any other kind of rights to call a broker. Rebecca made sure of that. Lydia Crane received a formal complaint from the Harlans and a very serious conversation with her broker. I did not file anything. Some consequences are better when they arrive without your fingerprints on them. The Harlans found another lake house near Morganton in the spring. Grant sent me a Christmas card with a photo of his family on a dock. He wrote 1 sentence inside. Found the right one after all. I kept that card. Lake Glenville remains inside the June Reed Family Trust. The amendment still stands. When I am gone, the lodge will become a quiet place for families carrying grief too heavy for regular rooms. Maybe one day Brandon and Hannah will understand that I did not give the lodge away because I stopped loving them. I gave it a purpose because they taught me money was not a safe enough purpose by itself. Love is not always an open hand. Sometimes love is a locked gate, a changed document, a father refusing to let his children become smaller versions of their worst afternoon. I still go to Lake Lure. I still check the dock. I still sweep pine needles from the porch. I still sit in June's blue chair when the evening is warm enough, though I always feel like I am borrowing it. Sometimes Hannah comes with takeout and no agenda. Sometimes Brandon calls and asks about the weather before he asks anything else. That is progress for him. He has not seen Lake Glenville. Neither of them has. Maybe they will one day, while I am alive, as guests, not owners. Guests. There is peace in that distinction. The last time I drove up there, frost had silvered the railings and the water was so still, it looked like the mountain had forgotten to breathe. I stood on the deck with both hands around a mug of coffee and thought about big things a man builds without knowing what they will one day have to withstand. Cabins, trusts, children, boundaries. A bridge inspector learned something most people forget. The failure rarely begins where the collapse happens. It begins years earlier, in a hidden crack, a rusted bolt, a small weakness everybody walked past because the structure still looked fine. My family looked fine for a long time. Then Brandon made a phone call. Hannah stayed quiet. A broker took pictures. A buyer made an offer. A table filled with documents waited for signatures. And finally, the load found the crack. I did not enjoy what happened in that title office. Do not mistake satisfaction for joy. Joy is June laughing with paint on her hands. Joy is Hannah, asleep in the loft, with a book on her chest. Joy is Brandon at 10 years old, asking if a crooked porch could still hold a family. What happened that November morning was not joy. It was justice. Cold, necessary, and overdue. So if you are listening to this and you have children, remember this. Teach them love. Yes, teach them generosity. Teach them that family matters more than money. But also teach them that a boundary is not a betrayal. Sometimes it is the last strong beam holding the house upright. And if you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Dad's Cold Justice. Drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I read more of those comments than you think. I will see you in the next story.